All right, here we go. Good evening and welcome to another edition of Showtime TV. I'm your host, Omar Rashada. This is a very special program tonight. I'm interviewing Kimberly Stock, and she is running for the board of the Brandywine School District. Kimberly, good evening, and thank you for being a guest on Showtime TV.
Hi, Omar. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Kimberly, so let's just start off with the basics. Your educational background. How did you begin? Where did you begin teaching, and what do you currently teach at now?
Sure, you bet. So I guess I can go back a little bit. So I actually grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska. And then I went to undergraduate school at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. And I got my degree to be an English speech and theater teacher. And I was actually really fortunate enough to get a job teaching high school right away, which was kind of crazy because I was probably about 22 years old, maybe, and some of my students were like 18 years old because I taught at a high school. So that was kind of funny. And then I've also taught in Massachusetts, and I worked at Olin College too. I'm not teaching though. And then I did get a master's degree in educational leadership. And I did an administration internship at AI High School. That was quite a while ago. And then I took a little bit of time off and was just tutoring with my children. And then I taught at Ursuline, and then I've also run the education programs at the Claymont Community Center. And now I'm at McCain, and I did get a second master's in basically teaching ESL. And that is from the University of Delaware. And I got my first master's at University of Pennsylvania. I don't know if I said that. So yeah, so that's kind of my education and my teaching background.
Wow, that was a lot. You're a busy lady.
Well, you know, I may not look as old as I am, but
that's a great thing.
Fit a lot into those years.
No. You mentioned you currently work at McKean. And previously, you worked at Ursuline, and the past show, your students from Ursuline were on my show. This is good. We was at the studio, Town 28. Talk about the difference between teaching at a private school versus teaching at a public school. Is there much difference, or is it the same?
Well, I mean, you know, on one hand, I mean, students are students, teenagers are teenagers, and so you know, so from that aspect, there are a lot of similarities. You still have to get students engaged and excited about what they're learning. You still have to create that classroom environment, and you have to develop that relationship with your students. That is true no matter where you teach. There are some differences, of course, because Ursuline is an all-girls school, and it is a private school. There was that aspect of it being a Catholic school too. And so there were some, you know, perhaps maybe conversation topics that were a little bit more freer for us to talk about without, you know, feeling like maybe someone was proselytizing to them. I did teach some boys because I did teach an exchange class with some boys from Sally's. But, you know, I would say that at Ursuline, and I would say most of my students at Ursuline were white. And came from I would say upper middle to, you know, higher income levels. That's not to say that their lives didn't have challenges or that that things came easily to them. It's just that there were some resources kind of already readily available. And then I would say at McCain, the students that I teach come from a lower socioeconomic background. I teach very few white students. Most of my students are English learners. They come from Spanish-speaking backgrounds and families. That's actually the majority of our students at McCain. They're of a Hispanic background. And I also teach, my students are diverse at McCain, but they also have challenges in their lives. They don't have the same set of opportunities, I would say, as perhaps my students at Ursuline have. I mean, a case in point, several of my students this year have to watch younger siblings, which that prevents them from coming in person to school. I know one of my students, and he watches his younger siblings, you know, 5+ hours a day, every single day of the year. I don't think I had any students at Ursuline who were in that kind of a situation. And so, I mean, again, kids are going to be kids and students are going to be, teenagers are going to be teenagers. But yes, I mean, obviously, my students at McCain, a lot of them are special ed, and of course, being English learners, and of course, coming into the classroom with perhaps some different trauma and challenges in their lives that are just different than perhaps the challenges and trauma as Ursuline students. Um, that's just the way it is.
Right, right. So what classes do you currently teach?
So I teach 11th grade English learners. It's an English class. So, which is different than their English language development class, which is a focus on them learning English. I actually try to teach what they would have learned in a regular ed English class, but for English learners. And then I also teach AP Lit. And then I am fortunate enough to push into lots of classes. We have over 160 English learners at McCain. And every EL student is entitled to services, and it varies depending on how they do on what's called the access test that they take every year. And then they are entitled to a certain amount of services and types of services. It's a challenge because there are over 160 students, and there are only 3 English learner teachers at McCain. So it's a challenge, but it's very fun, I have to say.
Right. Now, this year, you won this year or late last year, you won a very special award, Teacher of the Year award. Talk about what qualifications does one need to receive in terms of being a Teacher of the Year award? How does that process work? Were you nominated and then selected by your peer teachers or administrative? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in every state, I have learned this year, the process is different from every state, but in Delaware, you have to be nominated in your building. And then you can submit an application if you're nominated for the building. And then you are, basically what you submit is graded on a rubric. And then a team of your, which is made up of like one administrator but mostly of your colleagues, and they choose the building teacher of the year. And then you would go on to try to compete then for the district teacher of the year. So now you're competing against every building teacher of the year in your district. Now in Red Clay, because we're the largest school district, then you had to become one of the 4 semifinalists. And so I was surprised, honestly, to become a semifinalist. And then from the semifinalists, then you go on and then you usually have a classroom observation, an interview, those kinds of things. You continue to submit more of your application, I believe, or maybe not. I can't remember. But there's a lot of adding on to your application and changing your application. And then last May, then I was surprised to win the Red Clay Teacher of the Year. And then every district, so we have 19 public school districts in the state of Delaware, and then they combine all of the charter schools into one, charter, representative.
Right.
So the other 19 colleagues that were in the running, amazing. I mean, honestly, amazing humans, wonderful teachers, really, really amazing stories too. And I would say that that's kind of what they look for. It's not about finding who is quote unquote the best teacher in the whole state of Delaware, because really, what does that mean? That's kind of it's very subjective there. But I mean, you obviously have to be an effective educator. You have to be respected in your building by your peers, and you have to be able to articulate both in writing and in speaking, an advocacy for students and for teachers too. That's kind of your role as a Teacher of the Year. So that's really kind of what they're looking for, I think, in each step of the way. And I was again really surprised October of 2020 to find out that I was selected as a Delaware Teacher of the Year. And that really was a surprise, and it's been just a huge honor, obviously, especially this year when it's been just so hard for teachers and students and families this year. Yeah.
So tell me in the audience, or people who are watching, how did you find out you won? Did you get a phone call? Did you get an email? And then what exactly did you win? Did you win a new car? You know?
I wish. So I'm going to start off by saying no to the new car. However, I believe it's the, I want to say it's like maybe the Alabama or Mississippi Teacher of the Year does get a Mercedes. So yeah, that's another thing that I've learned this year, that every state Teacher of the Year gets different things. It's a very different process for each state. So no, so normally, Omar, every district would send like, maybe like 20 people from your district to the not Dover Downs, Dover Downs in Dover, and they would do like a huge banquet and everything, and then the winner would be announced at that night. Well, of course, this last year we couldn't do it that way, so it was all virtual. We had a very, very small gathering in our auditorium at McCain.
Okay.
And so actually the way that I found out is we were watching the event that they put together all through video. So honestly, kudos to Allison May at the Department of Education, because she was the mastermind behind, trying to put together something that still was special and honored every district and teacher, and still do it while we're all apart. And she did. So at the very end of the event, before they announced the winner, then the Secretary of Education had kind of said something, and then there was a kind of a pause of the video, and then she walked into the auditorium actually at McCain. So that was crazy. Everybody was surprised. I think there was only like maybe a couple people who actually knew ahead of time because they had to get some of the logistics set up. But I certainly didn't know, and the people there certainly didn't know. So it was really surprising and shocking. But luckily, Allison May, who is the one who organizes all of the Teacher of the Year, program for the state of Delaware, she had told all of us, all 20 of us, she said, I want you to write a speech that you're going to say if you win. So all of us had a prepared speech. And then what I did is I thought about it. I thought, it's going to feel really awkward if I don't win, which most likely I was totally expecting not to win. So I said, you know what, I'm going to also write a speech in case I don't win, which is just thanking the people who were there, and from a district perspective, because you're still the district representative. And so I had two speeches. But I had my clipboard because I'm a teacher. So I put the speech in case I won on top. And I just said, just for luck, I'll put it on top. So it was nice that I was able to actually give that one. So. Okay,
great. Okay, now the school board. What exactly is the job duties of being on the Brandywine School Board? What would be your duties if you successfully win?
Right. So a school board member is going to be somebody who is going to put forth policies, who would make decisions in policy changes. And would also actually a lot of people don't know this, but actually every hire in the district, like a teacher hire or even a superintendent hire, has to be approved actually by the school board. The school board is in the school district is the only elected official. And so a school board member really represents the people in the district. They represent the families, the students, and the teachers, and everybody who works in that school, who works in the school district. So it's an important role, but it's also a role where you really should be somebody who believes in the district, and you're somebody who has a vision, and you're able to articulate that vision, and you're able to, especially this year, somebody who can kind of bring together everybody in the district.
Right. Okay. So is this a paid position, or is this how many terms? Okay.
So that's a great question. So in some states, it is a paid position. It is not a paid position in the state of Delaware. So every school board member in the state of Delaware, it is a volunteer position only. In Delaware, you are elected for 5 years. And then it is staggered. So obviously there's 7 school board members for Brandywine, but not all 7, seats are up. It's only 1. So, and then next year there will, probably be another or maybe two, that kind of thing. So there's always kind of like experienced and veteran school board members, and then perhaps a new school board member if a new member were to get elected.
Right. So I'm thinking, if you successfully win, which I think you will, you'll be a school board member in the Brandywine School District, but you work in McKean currently in the Ridge Clay School Districts. So
Yep.
is that like a conflict of interest? I guess
No,
not.
in fact, the reality, yeah, the reality is that you cannot actually, you cannot be a school board member of a school district that employs you. So if I worked for Brandywine, I would not be able to run for school board. And likewise, since I work for Red Clay, if I lived in Red Clay School District, I wouldn't be able to run. So it's only the unique fact that I live in Brandywine, but I happen to work for Red Clay, that I can even have this, kind of unique vision. So I'll be honest, Omar, I see, what I know about Brandywine School District is as a, resident, as a parent, most importantly, and as somebody who partnered with different educators and different, for when I worked for the Claymont Community Center. That's kind of how I really see it. Now, of course, as a teacher, I certainly am understanding of different programs from a teacher perspective, but since I am not a teacher or an employee of the Brandywine School District, of course, and I don't have the pleasure of knowing what that is like exactly.
Well, okay, I want to get into some school issues, but prior, before we get to that, at what point did you decide that you wanted to run for the school board in Brandywine School District? Well, was it a family decision, or was you contemplating doing this for quite some time? What led you to want to run?
So I think, Omar, it's always been something in the back of my mind of something that I thought that maybe was something I could do one day. Obviously, I'm an educator. I'm a lifelong educator. So education and schools, that's my passion. That's what I've devoted my life to, besides my family. And so that's kind of been in the back of my mind. And then I just felt like this year as a teacher of the year, one of the pleasures that I've had is the ability to advocate for students, for schools, and teachers too. And I felt like when I saw that this, you have to be from so this year you had to live in nominating District F in order to apply to run. So you can't live, so like, for example, Omar, where you live, that's a different, I don't know what nominating district that is. So so you could not have run for this seat, but I'm not sure but your district, your nominating district, when that seat is up, you could run if you wanted to.
Okay.
So when I happened to see that it was this year, I thought, oh, kind of bad timing, but otherwise I have to wait for 5 more years. And I just thought, okay, it's time to do this. So of course I spoke to my family. I spoke to my husband. My husband, Omar, I think you've met my husband, Greg. He's really supportive of me. And he's really just supportive of, of my passions. And so he, of course, was in agreement. I said to him, I said, I don't have time to fundraise. So we would have to, kind of foot that bill. But I had done a little bit of research ahead of time about, what that might look like, how much that might cost. And it was a number that we felt like was something that we could afford. And so he was in agreement, because I had to get him to agree, and I had to get him to, realize that he would also be spending money on it too.
Right.
So you're, as a candidate, you can spend as much of your own money, on your own candidacy as you feel free. However, there are laws that stipulate how much people can donate. However, there is a limit to an individual donation. I think it's $600. I have not obviously seen that type of donation, but it's good that I don't have to worry too much about trying to get people to give me money. I'm just wanting to get their vote. And then I spoke to my kids. Because my oldest daughter, Carolyn, she is almost 20 years old, and she's a sophomore at the University of Delaware. And then there's Kate, and she's a freshman at the Brandywine High School, and she's 15 years old. And it would affect our family, for this to happen. They didn't really have too much to say. And so, and it kind of has been kind of a family affair, because like Kate, she helped me do like a lit drop the other day. Carolyn has also helped out with some different things, making a couple connections, and attending meetings, and a little bit of know-how with like social media and things like that. Of course, my husband, he is also, one of the people who helps with the campaign. But I also have outside people who also have volunteered to be on a campaign committee with me. And so there's no way that I could do this without their help, without the support of my family, and honestly, and without my drive and ability and kind of acceptance that I'm just not going to sleep very much right now. So
Right. Okay, so some of the issues, one issue, it seems to be an ongoing problem, generation after generation. You mentioned special education. So being an African American, growing up in the African American community,
mhm,
I know when I went to school, parents went to school, and this generation, and maybe generation before that, a good number of African Americans and Hispanics are in special education. Uh,
mhm,
they're considered based on SAT tests, maybe 2 or 3 grade levels below their actual grade.
mhm.
Um, and African Americans are more prone to be in detention, more prone to be suspended. So parents are going to be watching and saying, what can you do to even out the playing field? What can you do for my child as an African American in terms of providing quality education, um,
Mhm.
and not having them be sent to a detention every other week
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
suspension.
Right. So I feel like you brought up a couple of different issues. So I'm gonna address them kind of separately. So
Sure.
so the first issue was special education, and how does a student, how does it occur that a student would become identified and then quote unquote labeled of having a learning disability. And so the way that a student would happen is a teacher, a parent, or a parent, or somebody else in the school. Usually this child is young. Usually it's not the child, him or herself, who's asking for this type of support because they would not understand what that was, is saying, I think we need to see if my child has a learning disability. Or the teacher says, I feel like this child, might need to go through what's called a BMAT process, to see if they have a learning disability. Then they would have somebody come in who's trained to basically test the IQ versus how they do on tests, or how they do academically. If there is a disconnect between the level of IQ and where the student should be performing versus how the student does academically perform, then they can say, okay, it is reasonable to assess that there is a learning disability, and then they are the ones who would know specifically what kind that is. That is, beyond what I do as a teacher.
Okay.
And then what they do is they write a legal binding document called an IEP, or individual education plan, and then they basically say, okay, so because this child has an exceptionality, a learning disability in math areas, if you will, or reading and writing areas, if you will, then these accommodations need to occur in the classroom in order for this child to succeed. And that's really up to the team of people who come together and to write the plan, who sign off on the plan, and then every year those the same group of people, or if they go on to a different school, a different group of people, then take a look at, okay, what goals did we set last year, and what goals did we say that the child needed to meet? Okay, how did the child do in these goals? And then does the child still need services, and if so, what type of accommodations do we need to change and amend? So so that is kind of the process that a child could become learning, labeled as having a learning disability. So the reality is that since a parent could be the identifying person, or a teacher could be the identifying person, it is going to be an issue. And to Mary, the two issues that you brought up, which is kind of a little bit of maybe implicit bias, and perhaps racial bias. So it's going to be really important to understand, and for teachers to understand, do I have a bias here? Do I think that perhaps just because a child acts A, B, and C, and I expect children to act, D, E, and F, is there a problem with the way that I am understanding how children of different cultures are, or am I, what is happening there? The reality is that I feel like we're just starting to have that discussion and understanding about implicit bias, because I don't believe that there's any teacher. I mean, there are very few teachers who are going to say, yes, I actively am racist against, students from, this type of background. Most teachers are not like that. And so, but we all have implicit bias. So is that getting in the way with how we are perhaps disciplining students, or saying, I have a low tolerance for this, and so then therefore I think that all students who go beyond that are, quote unquote bad kids or something. Well, that's something that needs to be addressed with teachers as humans, and how we understand our own implicit bias, and how that can act and how that can influence what's happening in the classroom. The other issue, to connect, with the issue, is that it is absolutely our responsibility as teachers to understand and to see, okay, I have a couple of Black children in my classroom. What can I do as a teacher to make my classroom relevant for not only these children over here, but also my Black students too? I also want to be inclusive of who they are, so that they can see that who they are matters, and also to engage them too in learning. And it's something that I do all the time, Omar, to be honest, as a teacher. And once you do that, then you can say, okay, let's take a look at some more aspects. Let's take a look at, some other, some things, beyond you, because that's kind of what you do in education. But you got to start with who the child is, and you have to start with who they are, and be respectful and understanding of that. It is a lifetime of learning, to understand how to most effectively do this. Omar, I feel like I have been a proponent of anti-discrimination, of equality, of diversity since the mid-90s. And I feel like we're just getting to the point where maybe we have some of the right ideas about what we can do to actually, get rid of implicit bias and racism, and also systemic racism, because because if you have implicit bias, then that's going to influence how systems are set up to help certain students from certain backgrounds to succeed, and how it doesn't offer the same opportunities to some students to have the same levels of success.
Right. You mentioned the word anti. Let's talk about anti-bullying. I mean, because I mean, this social media thing, man, there have been cases where students, elementary, junior high, and high school, were being bullied on social media,
Yeah.
and as a result, they committed suicide.
Yeah.
So my two-part question is, as school board member of Brandywine School District, how will you
Uh-huh.
address bullying, and also, would you advocate, or would you be in agreement with courses being taught in the prevention in terms of suicide prevention training,
Yeah. Absolutely. So Omar, I know for a fact that and I'm in agreement with this, that the Brandywine School District in particular, that they have some really strong what's called social emotional learning programs. And they also and what that does is it helps, it's kind of the idea that we cannot just teach a child academically. We need to teach a child how to kind of grow and be in touch with who they are. Honestly, their social skills, their emotional skills are just as important too as well. And that's something that I know that is being done. And I think that is something that, in addition, in partnership with the social emotional learning, a lot of schools, including my own schools, have what's called positive behavior programs. And the philosophy behind that is that we cannot expect our students to behave a certain way if we haven't actively tried to engage them and teaching them what that is, and what that looks like. And that's where we on a level one, where we really are dealing with you know basically bullying, or treating people with respect, and why it is and why it's not helpful, and why it's not the way that we're going to behave at the school to not treat somebody with respect. And so it's really it does have to be almost like brought to the surface, if you will, and that is what we're trying to do as educators. It adds to the plate as educators. It really does, because it's more and more for us to do. But the reality is that these are really important life building skills that they need in order to be healthy, humans and happy humans. As far as like suicide prevention, yeah, absolutely. All of the things that are kind of wrong in society, like racism, homophobia, not accepting of people with who are transgender, those kinds of things. We have to also address that and look at that, at how it plays a role in our classrooms too, because our classrooms really do reflect what happens. And did you know that a teenager, a child who's transgender, is 30 to 40 to 50% of them have attempted suicide? That is a really terrifying,
Yeah.
yeah, really terrifying statistic in my mind. And the reality is that we have to be inclusive of them, not just accepting and tolerant of who people are, but also celebrating the joy of who they are. And that was something that was reiterated to me the other night when I attended a Zoom session about what transgender teachers could teach teachers, basically. And that
Yeah.
was one of the things that they brought up, is that don't just make it safe, make it a place where people can celebrate their joy. And I just thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly right, because we're so concerned with just making it safe. We have to go beyond that. And that's indicative of what we have to do for all of our students and our colleagues too, and who we work with. And do our colleagues feel like that where they work is a place where they are valued and respected? It's it's a lot. It is a lot. But as a school board member, absolutely, I think that we do have to have those types of programs on the table, because consistency is really key. When you are teaching students, if you want to understand why is it you go to certain schools and they say there's a certain culture that just exists, where people are proud to be at that school, and why are there certain schools where there's a culture where they are not proud to be at that school, that's something that you can actually work to build. And these programs like PBIS, the social emotional learning, these are things that can help kind of build that environment where um, you know students, teachers, the families, like they're really proud to be at that school. And that can help people feel included, students feel included, and make it more likely that when they are in trouble, that they're
Mhm.
going to reach out to an adult.
I remember having a conversation with my uncle. This is a few years back. He was working at one of the charter schools in the inner city of Wilmington. And one of the
Yeah.
things that he expressed was the concern was that the teachers would not come in for a parent conference for whatever reason. And I was telling him it could have been a lack of transportation. That's one barrier. It could be they may be working two jobs.
Yeah.
It could be contributing factors that result in parents not attending the parent conferences.
Right.
So, as school board member, what is your plan, or talk about your advocacy in terms of parents being involved with their children's education and setting up meetings? But see, now we got the Zoom thing, so
Yeah.
maybe that may help improve the numbers.
Yeah. Oh, Omar, I can tell you that has been the one positive of Zoom this year, is that it has made it so much easier for parents and families to come to school events. I think that we really need to take a look at, some of the benefits of Zoom and see if we can continue to incorporate that so that we can keep, more of our students and our families, more engaged with us. So that's been a huge benefit. It's interesting because it was a little while back that I was in a meeting. We were kind of talking about issues of, why families were not involved or coming to the parent-teacher conferences. And I remember somebody saying, instead of asking, why they're not, and and kind of make them feel like that they've done something wrong. Because as you said, Omar, oftentimes there's a lot of situations that are well beyond, what maybe you and I understand as a reality of having to make a living. And say, what can we do as a school community to what can we do for you? You know, Omar, I mean, many of us have had this idea as we have talked about this, is that one of the things that I wish could be done on parent teacher conferences or open house nights or back to school nights is, you know, how like, I'm going to take McCain for example. McCain has many buses who come to McCain. So what if those same buses ran the same routes, but at night? But instead of picking up students, they picked up families to come to schools. You know, I mean, like there's a way. How can we kind of like think outside of blaming them? Like, why aren't you doing this? No, what do we need to do? What can we change here? Because obviously the system that we have set up here isn't working for you. So what can we do? And just asking people, Omar, just asking people, what can we do differently? And I think right there, can you imagine, Omar, if people just sat down and just said to each other, what can we do differently here?
Right, coming together, yeah. You get input from everybody, which is very important. But sometimes decisions are being made that affect the people that's decisions involved the most. So I think
Yeah.
that definitely. I saw on your platform, your candidate platform, you are a strong advocate of having students involved in the board and then your student advisory committee, and then also what is your stance on adult education in the Brandywine School District? Because sometimes when we think about education, we think about the children, but Red Clay, Brandywine, Christina, they also have adult education programs.
Right. So I'll talk about the student involvement. So I think one of the things that I've learned as a high school teacher is that the best thing that I can do is to ask my students. And so, and I don't do it every day, but I often will say to them, hey, what did you think of this lesson? And what do you think I could do differently? And and that's another question that I've asked my students really frequently this year, kind of in the craziness of Zooming, rooming, and then, first Zooming. Is what do I need to do differently in order to help you succeed more? And I will say to them, I'll say, be critical and be honest. However, your goal should never be to make me go home and cry, because I think students will respond to, okay, I can be critical and I can be honest, but I don't have to be cruel. I don't have to be mean, and I can still, get my point across. Oh, there's that social emotional learning. So I will do that. I just think it's really critical that we get students involved and we have a student board member, because for example, our state board of education does have a student member. And she is fabulous. And I've seen her, and I've been involved with her, like when I did a presentation for them, and then she was involved in another presentation that I was involved in. And I'm telling you, now she is that student member is a non-voting member. So there are ways to incorporate that student in ways that could seem fair, I guess, of the people who are elected them. Or maybe their student could be a voting member and they are truly elected by their peers. So there are many ways that it could be done. I just think it'd be really important. The other thing is that to have like a student advisory, oftentimes we're bringing in all this different curriculum and all these different ideas and, to change this and to change that in schools. Do we ever say to our students, here's an idea that we have, now you tell us what that would feel like to you? What advice would you have for us? What do you want to see? Now, of course, and that can be really scary as adults to say that to students and to say that to teenagers. But honestly, I've seen it time and time again in my own experience. If you give teenagers the respect that they honestly deserve, and you treat them like humans capable of understanding a lot of things in life and capable of being able to advocate for themselves and for their peers, they will step up to the game every single day, Omar. And kind of going back to your first point about how can we make sure that the young Black male student in the class is getting the same kind of opportunities in education. Our teenagers, our youth, they are truly amazing. They understand what it is like to treat people with equity, to be respectful of who they are. They are so much better than adults. I say this all the time, and they're so vocal, and they're so, you know, willing to share and to have a voice. We just got to give them an opportunity to do so. So that was an answer to that question. I think there was a second part to the question too beyond the students. It was
the adult education, right?
Yeah. So Omar, actually, interestingly enough, that I learned when I worked at Claymont Community Center, and that was one of the things that I was doing, was I was building the adult education at Claymont. When I arrived at the Claymont Community Center, they had an ESL program for adults. But once those adults graduated from there, there was really nowhere else for them to go to kind of continue their education. Other school districts like Christina, like Red Clay, they do have adult education components. Now, people think that money comes out of the K-12 budget. It does not. It's a separate grant, if you will, that you apply for, that districts can apply for to run those programs. And so Brandywine does not have that kind of a formal adult education. Okay. And so that was one of the things that I tried to do when I was at the Claymont Community Center. And I got my partnership to run like a GED program, adult basic education, to grow the ESL program. And you know, like a James Groves program too, high school program. I got my partnership with Christina School District, actually, not the Brandywine School District.
Okay. Now, COVID-19, wow, that was a major transition for students and teachers. I mean, I see where parents were protesting outside the schools, demanding that their child be sent back to schools. That there are those who say, look, I don't want to send my child back in this mess. So what is your stance on how schools should run in regards to COVID-19? Because I see PS DuPont School, I assume that they're open a couple of days a week. I'm not sure if it's 5 days a week, but you know, it's a hot topic right now.
Yeah,
so.
it really is. And the reason why it's such a hot topic is because everybody's affected by it. Right. And everybody's perspective and opinion is correct because it's from their life experience. You know, and of course I've seen as a parent what it's like to see your child you know, have to learn, you know, entirely through Zoom. And as a teacher, I've certainly seen, you know, what it's been like, you know, and what it has done to, you know, us as teachers and as our students and as our schools. The correct answer is that, you know, as a school board member, you know, of course, I will not have the ability, let's say I were to get elected, I don't actually start taking office until I believe July of this year. You know, by then I'm going to guess that there's a comprehensive plan already put into place. But that doesn't mean that my role as a school board member is to take a look at all aspects of that plan. Is it in line with, first of all, science? Is it a plan that's going to, depending on what's happening with COVID and the variants and all that, I mean, how many people have been gotten vaccinated? Can we get kids vaccinated? Those are all things that are going to be really, really important to answer, you know, today, both in the fall too, for how that's going to look like. You know, most everybody wants school to look normal in the fall. But you know, what does that mean? And do we have the ability to do that? We'll have to rely on science. Oftentimes the governor will make recommendations based on, you know, hopefully with CDC guidelines as well as science too. And then, you know, I really think that it would be really helpful to everybody, including school districts, if perhaps the school districts in, you know, Newcastle County or northern Newcastle County even, were to say, can we come up with a plan that we kind of all try to adapt so that, you know, families aren't saying, well, Red Clay does this, and teachers and, you know, Christina aren't saying, well, the teachers in Red Clay got to do that. You know, I get that each district has its own autonomy, but, you know, perhaps there's some strength in numbers, and perhaps that plan could be a little bit adopted for each school district. But the bottom line is that, Omar, you know, COVID is dangerous. And you know, I know that some people have gotten it and didn't have very bad side effects or didn't have side effects, but I also know people, and I'm sure everybody knows people who have died of COVID. I have students who have lost fathers from COVID, or a live-in grandmother to COVID. This is a really, dangerous dangerous thing. So, first and foremost, we have to be safe. And secondly, again, I'm going to advocate that there are more people represented in that decision So that includes teachers, that includes parents, and that includes students too. Because the people that these plans affect the most on a daily basis are students and teachers.
Right. You just mentioned teachers. Well, you're a teacher yourself, so I saw on your platform there was something of the fact that you want teachers to be rewarded. So you've talked about that a little bit, and then what quality should a teacher have? I mean, a teacher can have a master's degree, a doctor's degree in education, but if they don't have the passion and love to help their fellow students,
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think an effective teacher needs to have these ingredients. They need to have a love for children or teenagers, whomever it is that you're working with. They need to have a depth of their subject area that they are teaching, and they also need to have a willingness to evaluate and reevaluate what they are doing in order to change it, in order to improve. And another thing that a good teacher does is, she's herself, he's himself. And, I mean, that's one of the things that I've really learned as a teacher by kind of studying colleagues and being kind of envious of maybe certain colleagues and saying, oh, I wish I was, the teacher who everybody thought was so, cool and knew all the music and blah, 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 blah. That's not me though. That's okay, because I bring myself, and who I am. And as long as I can kind of fully bring that, and I have all the other ingredients, the willingness to evaluate what I'm doing, to change, a depth of knowledge that I continue to improve, and also, a passion and a love, for my students, you're going to be a good teacher. No matter if you're teaching at a private school, or if you're teaching at a all white public school, or you're teaching an all Spanish speaking public school, like you're going to be a good teacher.
Right. So in the closing segment of this particular show, that was going very well, I want to give you the opportunity to tell people how they can contact you if you're looking for those to help you with your campaign run. When is the election? If someone wants to sign to put on their grass.
Oh my gosh, yeah, absolutely. So we're so in answer to all those questions, first of all, you can send me an email. It is Stock, that's my last name, STOCK for FORBSD@gmail.com. So stock4bsd@gmail.com. My website is really easy to remember. It is just my name, kimstockteacher.com. No spaces. There's going to be all that information. The election is on May 11th. The polls open at 7 a.m. and they close at 8 p.m. There are 11 voting locations in the Brandywine School District, and you don't even have to be a registered voter to vote. All you have to be is 18 years old. You have to live in the Brandywine School District, and you have to be a U.S. citizen. If you are those three things, you can go vote. And it is school board members who make critical decisions that really affect our lives in a really important and profound manner. So it is really important to vote. I'm going to ask for people to go to my website and for them to, see what I am about. And there's some videos of me. There's videos of me teaching. There's videos of me talking about teaching. But there's also just my ideas too. There's articles about me. So there is an opportunity for somebody, I feel like, to get to know me. Also, Omar, I'm going to have tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. And all they have to do is send me an email message, or I also have a Facebook campaign page. I have an Instagram campaign page too. Is all they have to do is send me a message, and they can come to an open town hall, and they can invite their friends, and they can learn a little bit more about me, and then have an opportunity to ask me questions. And if I don't know the answer to something, I will certainly say that I don't know the answer to something, and see if there was a way for me to find out the answer for that person. And also, we're going to be doing lit drops. We've already kind of started to do that. And Omar, you can let me know if you would like to do a lit drop with me around PS DuPont neighborhood.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Now I'm gonna give you you got 2-3 minutes left. You can do an elevator speech in regards to why the residents of the Brandywine School District should vote for you for school board.
Okay. Well, I think that you should actually vote for me, Kim Stock, because I am a parent in the district. And I think that that is my most important job, is to be a parent. However, I'm not just a parent. I'm also somebody who has demonstrated as in my passion for education, as my career choice as a teacher in every job that I've had, as involved in education, and I'm an effective educator. As you know, given my title as a teacher of the year, that it is something that I have ideas and that they can work, and and the most important thing is I'm willing to listen to you, and I am willing to partner with you and to understand your perspective and to see if there's some way that we can work together to bring about more change for our students and for our schools, which is the most important priority. And teachers, if you're watching, you know that I am somebody who is also wearing a mask, 9 hours a day, and teaching both rooming and Zooming at the same time. And I understand how it has felt this year. And I also understand how hard that you have worked and how oftentimes you have felt like people do not understand that. And I think that's time I actually think that's time to change. And I think that your voice is important. And as I'm going to quote actually the 2020 Delaware Teacher of the Year, Rebecca Vitale, and she always says that teacher voice has never been more important. But the reality is that parents need a voice too. I think that's where a lot of frustration comes from. And our students too. We need to involve them too in part of the process and stop our districts from being so top heavy and more inclusive.
Okay, so if someone's watching, want to send a donation, how can I send a donation?
So if you go to my website, kimstockteacher.com, there are a couple of ways. If you click on the button that says support me or to donate, it will take you to the same place. You can actually donate through Act Blue. Or you can also write a check and send that to our treasurer.
Okay, all right, Kimberly, it was great interviewing you. I wish you the best of luck.
Omar, it's always great. It's always great talking to you.
Okay, and stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.
You bet. Thanks.
All right, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you for tuning in for tonight's program. God bless.